Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Suzanne Rath. She is a speaker, executive health and leadership coach based in Australia, and she empowers individuals and organizations to thrive through science-backed frameworks that boost energy, well-being, and productivity. Welcome to the show, Suzanne.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Suzanne. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about how one can reclaim their energy, how one can lead without facing burnout. We'll talk about all this, but let's first talk about a bit about your background, your journey, so that audience knows who they are listening to.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is as a physiotherapist, and I like to say that I'm kind of on to Sue's 3.0 now. So spent a number of years as an employee, as a physiotherapist, was born in Ireland, studied in Ireland, moved to Australia 13 years ago, and I worked across various settings. And then 12 years ago, I was cycling home from work one day when I was hit by a car. And so I sustained pretty serious fractures to my jaw, but it was actually the ongoing issues that I had that were the real problem. So I essentially had a post-concussion syndrome where I had 2 years of constant pain, chronic fatigue, anxiety. And so I couldn't do the work I could do before. Like I couldn't concentrate, I couldn't focus, I couldn't go from patient to patient to patient. And I really had to put a team together around myself to aid my recovery, but I was unwilling to take no for an answer. And, having that vision, wanting to get better and navigating the way to get there is a core part of my endurance leadership formula to hit, whatever goal it is that we want to hit in life. And so then, got myself to a point where I could go back to working as a physio, and I wanted to create a clinic that I had wanted to go to and the clinic that I had needed. So my vision was very much for that multidisciplinary space, which I've created. So 8 years ago, I started a clinic in Cairns in far north Queensland, which is in the tropics in Australia, very hot, humid. And it was just me. And I've built that in that period of time to being 3 clinics: psychology, occupational therapy, exercise physiology, and naturopathies, a whole range of things. We've also got some innovative services. And a couple of years ago, I thought, right, I've kind of reached what I wanted to achieve with this business. And we obviously keep bringing in new people that add value and new services that add value. But I really questioned, how do I impact more people, and how do I impact more people outside of just the treatment room, like seeing one person at a time? And so my journey, both in terms of recovering from chronic illness, I also suffered from burnout a couple of years ago, through to now, like leading a successful business, designing my ideal role, doing tons of leadership work, and becoming a coach really frames a lot of what I do.
Absolutely, absolutely, Suzanne. So coming to the energy part, means I want to understand everyone gets their energy from what they eat, what they do, how they think, whatever, the way their mindset is. But I want to understand is that in terms of energy that you talk about, 20% extra energy that you can, why do we have to go to athletes and learn it? Why can't we learn from ourselves or things around us? What is it that athletes do and we don't?
So I have developed a formula or a framework essentially called Endures. And so I can talk you through it. So essentially we spoke about the vision. So athletes are very single-minded in terms of their focus. And I've actually just completed what was supposed to be an Ironman, and the swim got cancelled, but that's a whole other story. But, for me to do that, for the 9 months prior to that, that was my sole priority, right? And then my business and my coaching was second and third. And then so I let go of a lot of other things, right? Things that were unnecessary. Whether it was social events or, I leveraged by getting someone to clean the house or whatever it might be. And I think a lot of the time people in business find themselves running between every single little task. So they're not actually leading, they're managing their lives. And they're not singularly focused on their goal or their vision. And so they keep getting derailed by all these little things. And I know I've certainly had points in my business where I've done that. And so we know that 97% of athletes who have a vision and who keep that vision really front and center credit it for their success. Then the next thing is navigating. So it's not enough just to have a vision and then never think about it, right? You need to work out a way to get there. And that for me takes the format of things like setting in place a default diary, structuring my day around my energy, using a coach, constantly coming back to those priorities, reviewing my goals and so on, just to make sure I'm not going off course. And then the third factor is, how do we drive? Like, how do we get through things when things are hard? Because we think that success is going to be linear, and it's not. There's so many ups and downs along the way. And, a core part of my message in my keynote is courage. And so it's having the courage to put yourself in the arena or go after your goals, even when you risk failure or even when you risk disappointment. Then the fourth aspect is using recovery. So I think, the rise of burnout in the workplace, particularly in Australia, and I think the US, in Australia, we have a real productivity crisis. And so we hit a point where just working becomes counterproductive. And, people are really not into that hustle culture anymore. And so we have to put in place these intentional breaks, these intentional recoveries, the same way that athletes do. Like, athletes don't get up and sprint train every single day. Everything's very structured around, what do I eat? How much rest do I get? Like, do I have a massage? Whatever that might be. And then the fifth point is we need to refocus and reset. So I regularly refocus and reset. Right in front of me in my office is my vision board, which is very visual of the things I want to achieve. To one side are my goals, and my goals are my SMART goals. And I reflect on those constantly. It's said that planes are off course more than 90% of the time. So they're constantly making micro adjustments. So in the same way that an athlete would make adjustments to their training, we need to make little adjustments if we want to achieve big goals, whether it's in our business or our life. And then the next thing is about, how do we elevate? So there's a thing about achievement fallacy. Sometimes a lot of people, they get to a point where they reach a leadership role and they think, oh, this really isn't as good as I thought it would be. Or they hit a point in their business. And I know I certainly was there. Like, I won a major award 2 years ago and I just felt empty. So they're questioning, well, is this it? And so elevation's about going, well, actually, what's the next thing in my vision? Like, what's the next race or what's the next target? And so for me, now I've recently done this big endurance event. Now that stage of the part of my life I'm elevating now is my coaching and my speaking, because that's sort of been below the training. Now the training can go below and the coaching and speaking can come here. And then I guess the final part is really about, how do we do that sustainably? So, how do we fall in love with the process? How do we find joy? How do we, develop these high performance health habits and boundaries and build adaptability and resilience, like all of these things that allow us to have a business life or a life in general or a working life that is a marathon and not just a sprint.
Absolutely, Suzanne. So in terms of, a lot of leaders will say, Suzanne, I don't have time. And so how can they learn? Even athletes have to worry about money. Not every athlete will earn it. They can also say, we don't have time, but they do their job. Why is it that leaders say we don't have time? And how does one solve this problem of actual time? Is it that they don't have time, or is it about the problem with the mindset?
So there's a concept of time bending, which I think I practice quite well. And it requires work and discipline and focus. So I can honestly say there rarely something has come in my life that I felt like it was the right time. And so nothing happens unless you commit. Like, I'm co-hosting a retreat in September this year, and I speak to a lot of people who want to come next year. Like, they think this year isn't the right time. But I really feel sometimes you just have to commit and make things happen. And whether it's a race or a holiday or hiring a new team member, so many things I have questioned myself, and I've just made myself do it. So that, space to step away, space to find the clarity, and getting a coach, like whatever it might be, it almost always pays off, right? You make the time. And I guess the other thing I would say in terms of like leading rather than managing your life and time bending, I am quite structured with my time blocking and putting in the core tasks at the time of the day that I'm most energized. And so when I get up in the morning, I work according to what the priority task is. So I don't jump straight into my emails and let myself get derailed by other people. I don't twiddle on my phone. I get straight into the priority task. Now, sometimes that might be a training session, or it might be a breakfast with a friend, and I might start my day later. And sometimes I start the day later and I find I only have maybe 3 hours for this focused task. And I'm amazed at the things I can get done within that 3-hour block as opposed to a whole day. It's I put away my phone, I open only the tabs I need, and I focus on that one thing. So yeah, but I have a whole suite of tools and coaching things for this.
Absolutely. What is the concept of this 20%? And everyone gets their energy, as I said earlier on, from food, from the way they think, from everything that they do. But what is it that steals their energy most? And where will they reclaim this 20% extra energy from? Is it that it goes somewhere, someone steals it, or is it within your system itself?
Look, I think there's a lot of energy drains and there's a lot of people stealing our energy, but I would prefer to focus on what we can control. So instead of having that external locus of control and blaming, what we as individuals can control. And so, first of all, to answer your question about the 20%, so this is the Pareto principle of saying that 80% of our results come from 20% of our habits. And so if we constantly refocus and think, what is the one thing that will move the needle now, whether it's in my life or my business? What is the most important thing? What is the most important thing? And focus on that. Instead, what we tend to do is we focus on all the little things. This email needs to be replied to. That person needs me. I need to fix this thing. I need to do a stock take, like whatever it might be. So we're running around doing unfocused work. And then to answer your question about energy, so I have an energy, a sustainable energy model, which has 3 main factors in it. So one aspect is vitality. And as you mentioned, that's, what we eat, how much rest we get, but it's also the things that bring us joy. Like, do we know what we like to do? And do we deliberately and intentionally put those things into our lives? Then the second pillar is about alignment. And so what really changed my life in my role was not just how I aligned my life with my values and my business with my values. And to do that, you've got to set really good boundaries and, be very, very intentional with what you say no to if it doesn't align with your values, but also how I aligned my role and the work that I do with my strengths. And so I had trained myself to be really good at things. Like lots of business owners, they wear all the hats. And so I'm good at things like, say, bookkeeping and, reading a profit and loss statement, but I hate it. Whereas the things that I love doing are coming up with the ideas and big picture thinking. So I love the visionary, the leadership, the strategy. And so I really redeveloped my role for that to be 80% of my role, and to minimize the little things that I really don't like doing. And I looked at the working genius model and hired people to do the tasks that I don't like doing, and to bring people together around the ideas and make sure the ideas are happening. And then the third pillar, connection.
Carry on,
Yeah.
carry on. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Carry on, carry on. Yeah.
we connect to ourselves and obviously how we connect to others. And so that answers your question about energizing relationships. Many of us find ourselves in relationships because we have to, right? There's maybe like the friends from school who you feel like you should meet up with, but you meet up with them and all they do is complain, and then you leave and you're exhausted and you've wasted 3 hours of your day, and all those little things where we lose bits of ourselves.
Absolutely. Let's understand things a bit from the ground. What is it that your clients, leaders come to you for? What is it that exactly they need help in?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different avatars, really. So I recently ran a great retreat, and I run a lot of team days and things like that. And a lot of the topics people ask me to cover are that energy audit, things like vision and values alignment, boosting adaptability, avoiding burnout, and boosting resilience. So those are really key. With those, I mentioned we have a productivity crisis in Australia. And so my endurance leadership is really about high performance. So at its core, it's about high performance and the courage to put yourself out there. And so that is a keynote for conferences, for teams, which, traditionally were high performance industries, things like finance and law, but also, bigger healthcare franchises and things where we just really want to inspire people to actually take some accountability for themselves and to take action, right? To take on that internal locus of control and develop that self-leadership so that they can thrive, and then so the workplace can thrive.
Absolutely. So, in a nutshell, Suzanne, how would you like to put, how one can get started? What are the few things that they can do to get to this particular level of high level of energy that can lead to endurance and productivity, including, some of the aspects of your framework?
Yeah, so I would say the first thing is to get really clear on what you want, because a lot of people don't. So even things like getting a life wheel, and these are free online. So you rate different areas of your life and you think about what would a 10 out of 10 be? And it's not about everything in your life being perfect or being a 10 out of 10, but thinking, well, what's important to me? Is it important to me to spend more time with my family? And what would that look like? So getting clarity on that is really important. I've got a number, probably my 3 most important free tools are available for download on my website. So there's a boundary setting tool, because a lot of people just need to set better boundaries to manage their energy and their time, right? Nobody's coming to save us. The world's not getting any less busy. So we need to lead ourselves, and we need to take control of our own lives and our own time. So I have that boundaries tool. And I have a time tracker as well, which I think is really good to do. They're tedious, but you can look back on it and think, which work is not energizing for me? Where am I multitasking? What things am I doing that I don't need to be doing anymore? What, activities am I doing that I actually don't like, right? I'm doing it because I should, like going to that dinner party or whatever it might be, but then feeling really drained by it. So looking at it, it's like doing a diet diary. If you look back over it and you think, oh, I'm lying to myself. And then the third one, which is for free, is my personal tool, which is a vital health pillars tool. And it looks at vitality, what we eat and drink, how much we move, how adaptable we are, and how we spend our leisure time.
Absolutely. There's much to understand and learn about all these things from you, Suzanne. And I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you, learn also about your framework. And also about that retreat that we're having in September. What is the best way for them to do so?
So I'm on LinkedIn as Suzanne Rath. So encourage anyone to reach out and connect with me. And then my website is suzannerath.com.au, and that has those free resources on there.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.